is not that. I used to think, well, we all thought that when you throw the clay down, that's where the term comes from. But actually, I think it's an Italian term for turning. It's a good idea. I know some of you work on the wheel, and I think, now I may be going through too many basics here, so if I see people get bored, I'm just going to jump ahead to the hard stuff. So far I'm not seeing it.
I always learn something
Maybe.
new from you.
Oh,
I do.
well, good stuff. Oh, good.
Like, yeah,
I
why didn't I think of
didn't
that?
want to assume anything.
No.
Okay, so once again, start out at top speed. You can imagine how the guy laying on his side was getting the work out. But actually, those wheels, they weren't wheels, potter's wheels, in the way we think about them nowadays. They were slow wheels. You know, they just turned about the rate of might turn a turntable.
Did you ever use regular kick wheels much?
I used to, you know, and all the technology, not that there's been an enormous amount, but it's come along with development of materials and, you know, electricity and engineering and all that. It's still a pretty simple tool, but a lot of potters still use the kick wheel. They prefer it. So it's kind of what you get used to. But certainly as the wheel got faster, it made production, it really extended the amount of, shortened the amount of time it would take to make something and increase the numbers. So once that's centered, and for you wheel throwers, a lot of times the hardest part to get centered is that little ripple, and you just push and push and push, and it won't seem to go away, and sometimes it just gets worse. But if you can, you know, naturally you want to get your elbows in, get up close to the wheel, so that when your body, when you lean over the clay, your body weight drives your arm into the clay. Another really good thing to do is to put one hand on the back, one on the front. And if you have a hard time getting that last little bit, just try bending your fingers and digging into the clay just a little. And sometimes that'll get that last little bit. I like to push the clay up into a cone and back down. That's something I think a lot of potters do rather routinely. And that just kind of helps align the particles. And then you're ready to open it up. I like to use the heel of my hand when I'm working with enough quantity of clay to do that. If it's like 1.5 pounds or so, you might want to use your fingers. But if you're making a bowl or you're working with more clay, then that part of your hand is ergonomically really good. It gives you a lot of power where you need it without just a whole lot of effort. Another problematic thing is knowing how thick the bottom is. And the best way to determine that, you know, we tend to kind of be right over the clay and we're only looking at the bottom. If you back up and sort of, you get a much clearer sense of the relationship of the bottom to the bat, and you can read it better. It's like a lot of things, you back up and you see the whole picture. Another thing you can do until you get that skill down is to use the needle. I cut this one off at about 1/2 inch, which is about the amount of clay I want in the bottom if I'm planning to trim a foot. So I need to leave a little extra if I'm gonna do a foot. So you can go down with that, and I can see that the clay is going up beyond the top of that, so I know it's still just a little bit thick. And then once you get that, it's just about right. Once you get that where you want it, then you can just bring it out. And at this point, need to be thinking about what it is I'm making. Because if it's something with a real broad bottom, then I need to bring the clay out. It's like if you're gonna build a big house, you need a big foundation. If you're building a little shed, you know, it can be smaller. But the floor has to be out underneath the wall. You don't want the floor here and the wall kind of detached from it. So I like to just gather the clay up, pull it straight out, and make a little donut, and then cut in under it with my thumb on the outside. And then from there, I can just pinch the wall in and bring it up. I'm aiming for a place, you know, a point above this cylinder, about so far. So I want the wall to come up and in. If you allow it to float out, then it's hard to get it back in because it's in vertical holes. I kind of like to use my knuckle. Sometimes, you know, people use their middle fingers to grab it and pull it up, and that's probably one of the harder things to learn how to do, because you have to hold your hand steady as you're controlling the thickness and moving upward all at the same time. So you'll notice as soon as, however, I mean, I'm going to use my knuckle on the outside, but as soon as I can, I'll get that inside hand or thumb out to brace it. So the second half of the cylinder, I've got a little more control. Always want to keep that little fat part, that little fat ring above my outside hand. If you let it, if you let that ring get, or your inside finger get opposite your outside finger, that ring's gonna peel off in your hands. Hopefully this is good for the people who are thinking about throwing or beginning throwing or maybe further along, and not boring the rest of you. Are we okay?
We're good.
All right. What would you have said? I mean, if I
we
was
weren't good.
boring you, would you tell me?
No.
I just
All
learned
right.
something because I have that ring problem sometimes.
Yeah, it comes on. Yeah.
So that's, you know, so I just, my hands or my fingers are not my right.
When you get up about 2/3, half to 2/3 of the way, it's good to let off on the pressure. If you don't, you'll just go through the wall. Because down here, you're pushing against the clay where it's attached to the bat. But up higher, it's much more sensitive to pressure, and you can easily go right through. Of course, I'm working in the lower right quadrant. That way, clay is gliding over my fingers. You shift over to the other side and apply pressure. It's kind of like running with a stick in your hand out front, you know, if it digs into the ground, all that poking. My mama taught me that. Don't run with a stick. Always. But she said, don't run with a stick in your hand. My dad said, it's okay. You can run with a stick in your hand. Just have it behind you.
So wise.
Smart man.
that was important distinction. Okay, so we need to slow down a little because the wall's getting a little thinner. Okay, so the wall's pretty even. It's still a little bit thick, but I'm going to spread it, and that'll reduce the thickness. It's kind of hard to get some of the clay right down there at the bottom, so I'm going to cut that away. Take that ring off. thought I brought a different spoon than that, but that'll work. When you're coming up, you gotta watch for sudden changes in direction, because that's where it's gonna be weak. If it collapses anywhere, that's where it's gonna collapse. So in the first pass, I'll spread it a little, and then on the next pass, I want to start drying it off. Some of that surface. Start working a little drier. If you keep adding water, the clay just keeps getting wetter and softer. Well, it's able to hold the shape. Rubs are really handy. They really freshen up the clay. I tend to like real defined forms. Rubs are really good for that. So you can see with each pass, getting a little larger in diameter. Every time I do this, decide I'm going to make some bottle forms, it will usually take one or two before I really begin to get the feel for what I'm doing. It's all about form and shape. I kind of like that coming up there, sort of a waist and a belly and a shoulder and a neck. Sometimes they seem rather masculine and sometimes feminine. This wheel is pretty quiet.
It is quite.
Not bad.
I thought it was gonna be kind of
We had two of them, and maybe one was quieter than the other. We sold one at the garage sale.
Yeah. So I'm gonna choke that in just a little. So I could stop here and make a lid. If the top got more narrow, you can reach back in with a spoon. You kind of see where the spoon is pressing.
Why do you like a spoon over your hand doing that?
It's just a more general pressure, and it's a form that, I mean, it would be hard to make that continuous curve from here to here. What is that? Maybe 4 or
Instead
5
of your
inches.
hand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think your fingers are probably too specific. it's a pressure point rather than a curve. We should just see how far we can go. But it's really getting thin.
Is that B-Max then?
Is what?
Is that B-Max or Cinco Blanco?
That's,
Dillo White.
Delaware, yeah. Okay, so let's say if we